The next one in the center top is the watching the lobster boats at sunrise. And that is something that came through loud and clear from the folks who sent their ideas in. You'll see when you come up close that we've got one boat that's going out to the lobster buoys, and then we have another boat up on the horizon that's coming back in again. Now, I had a tremendously difficult time trying to get that boat look just right. The first time I tried, it looked a little bit like a tanker. Well, I didn't think that we had too many tankers in the bay, so I thought that that better not be utilized. So it didn't seem to matter what I tried, it didn't work. So I have to very much thank my husband, and I'm not sure where he is, he's somewhere in the audience there, for drawing a little boat for me. So I consider that to be Wayne's boat that's coming back in with a load of lobsters. So. And then over on the top right-hand side, that's the old main lodge. That's what it looked like. That's my interpretation of what it looked like. And I worked from a picture also with that one. Now, as I mentioned before, I worked on 2 blocks at a time. And it just, that way you can kind of go from one block to another and just back again, depending on where your inspiration happened to be at that particular day. But when I was shopping one day for some fabric, any of you quilters know in the audience how difficult that is to shop for fabric. We love to shop for fabric. But I wasn't shopping for fabric for that particular block. But there was that piece of fabric that's in the background that just fairly jumped off the shelf at me. And I just kept going back to it and going back to it, and I just knew that that particular fabric had to be in the background for the Old Main. It just said exactly what I felt it needed to say for that Old Main Lodge. The center block, the fireplace. As I mentioned before, the heart of White Point. Now, when the lodge burned a year ago, the one thing that was left standing like a big sentinel was that fireplace right up through the center of the sky, basically. And so that's why I felt that that fireplace needed to go right up through the center of the quilt. And I'm very happy with the actual result. When we started with these stitching parties, and just as a little bit of history, we all think of, in today's world, when we think of quilting, people quilting, we think of a quilting bee. That's the term that's generally used. But according to Scott Robson's book, Old Nova Scotia Quilts, back in the day, quiltings were quiltings. What we think of today as a quilting bee was then called either a quilting or a quilting party. So that's why we used that name. Now this particular quilt, as Donna mentioned, has traveled almost or maybe over 5,000 kilometers. So it's very unique in that way. What we did was we took the blocks, as the blocks were constructed, not the whole quilt obviously, and people added their stitches to each individual block. We went to the fire hall and we had all the firemen add their stitches. We had people from as young as 3 to as old as 90 put their stitches in this quilt in one form or another. We probably had as many men as we had women add their stitches. And as Donna mentioned, we gathered so many stories. So this quilt really is, it's a story quilt. If you come and look at it, you will hear the stories. You can listen to the stories that it's telling you. And almost everybody will see something that triggers a memory in their lives. Quilts have a way of doing that, I find. They just, as soon as you mention quilt in any of these stitching parties that we went to, people started to think in a little different way and would tell you some of the most interesting stories along the way. The White Point logo is there. We've got the Nova Scotia flag there. We have the Nova Scotia tartan there, which is a beautiful tartan. We have the screen at White Point, a little bit of fabric on the inside there. One of my friends wasn't able to come to any of the stitching parties, but she really wanted to be part of this, so she sent me down some fabric, which I used for the logs that are inside the screen. And she's my friend Carolyn, who's right over there. And then I really wanted to get the Canada flag in there, but it just didn't seem to fit anywhere. So I really was very happy with the maple leaf just sort of floating down. To me, it looks like it's just sort of gently caressing that fireplace there. And last, after all of these blocks were done, and we had, I think, how many stitching parties did we have, Donna?
24.
24 stitching parties in all different places. I'm sure there were a lot of firsts in this quilt. I'm sure it was the first stitching party to ever happen on the waterfront in Halifax, and that was during Tall Ships. We went to Saltscapes in Toronto, and very likely it was the first stitching party that was ever to have happened on the waterfront in Toronto, and that was just an absolutely wonderful time. It was so many people came, and they put their stitches in, and they were expats from Nova Scotia or from Newfoundland or from wherever, and they were so excited to be able to just sit for a few minutes and put that stitch in. There were many people who had never threaded a needle before. Now that was a lot of fun, I can tell you. They thought I was brilliant when I could show them how to thread a needle. There were people from all over the world that added their stitches as far away as China, as Donna mentioned. Australia, I was looking through the book and there was someone from Australia, somebody from Sweden, England, and all over Canada and the US.
Our youngest stitcher was
3
years old.
3 years old. I wonder what story he's telling today, because I'm pretty sure it was a little boy. The other thing that we were able to do during this whole process, because it generated a lot of interest, we were able to introduce stitching, quilting to another generation. We had a couple of stitching parties where we incorporated some little blocks that we encouraged the kids to come and make their own bunny block, and that was a takeaway that they could take with them when they went home. And oh my goodness, they had so much fun. I have a picture here. This is one of my favorite pictures all the way along. This was at one of the stitching parties, and I'll leave it here and you folks can have a look at it. It was at the fire hall when we were there inviting people to come and have their breakfast, support the local firemen, also put their stitch in the fireplace, and we incorporated a little project for the kids. This was again the bunny block, and you'll see that all of the little ones that are here surrounding me in this one, they're all boys. They all have their little block. They're looking so happy, and they are having an absolutely wonderful time. And honestly, this is just one of the most amazing things that happens when quilts are involved. The other thing that I'm going to mention is just how it was constructed, what's going around the outside. Wasn't sure just exactly after I got the centerpiece together how I was going to incorporate all this. So in the end, this is a lovely piece of fabric that has flowers. It might even be mistletoe, although I'm not quite sure. I just love the color and the design in it. And it worked in really well because when we were actually quilting, when we were doing the quilting process, and that happened at Lakeside Hall. That was after the blocks were all constructed. Everybody had added their stitch in our mobile stitching parties, because that's what I started to call them, was our mobile stitching parties. When the top was constructed and it was now stationary, wasn't going anywhere, it was in the frame, in the quilting frame. Where are you, Lynn? And she's over there. Lynn was the person in charge of getting it nice and straight and organized in the quilting frame. We had this all organized. This border all the way around side became the bunny trail. People really, all of the ladies and the gentlemen really enjoyed putting their stitch in the bunny trail. And as Donna alluded to, when we first talked about this, I thought, oh dear, how am I going to ever manage having all kinds of people with all kinds of stitches putting their stitches in this particular quilt? But I quickly learned that just like the bunnies have different sized feet, the bunnies go in different directions, and the bunnies are all important, and it's all about telling the story. It really is all about the story, this particular quilt. I would like very much to give my undying gratitude to Donna Hanna, who was always there for me, always there with guidance. This was Donna's vision, and I just think it's an absolutely brilliant way of stitching a community together, keeping a community together, keeping the information about this wonderful spot. And so thank you very much, Donna, and please, a great round of applause for Donna.